expense management is one of the solutions that Continia offers, and I'm going to talk about this from about 30,000 feet. So it'll be an overview of the product, and if there's interest, we can go a lot deeper and do deep dive presentations into it. I've got a brief 7 slides to start with, and then after that, we'll get straight into the demo. So to start with, I just want to look at the benefits of the product and who it benefits. So there's the expense user. Instead of having to fill in forms and scan them and send them in, or key into clunky old-fashioned systems, they can now do all their expense reporting on the go. So they can do that on their Android device, on their iOS device, and that can be online or offline. They don't need a connection. They can jump onto a browser if they want to do it on their computer, and they can also, if they have a Business Central or NAV sign-in, they can work in there as well. And then we're looking at the approver, and again, the approver can work whenever and wherever and whatever device they want to work on. So they can approve on an Android or an iOS. They can work through a browser in an approval portal, or they can be in Business Central if they are a Business Central or NAV user. And then finally, we've got the bookkeeper, and the bookkeeper works inside Business Central and Navision. So really the advantage there for the bookkeeper is they're not working with a standalone different system with different interfaces and so on. So I'll talk a little bit about who Continia are. We won't spend much time on that, but we started life in 1992, and a lot of people then came from the original Navision team, and since 1992, all we've been doing is producing solutions. So we don't work with end users. We have a model where we work through partners around the world. So we're a well-established global solutions provider now, and in fact, we're the most popular vendor on the Business Central App Store now. So obviously, we're very close to Microsoft and work with them and know what's coming up, and can keep our products in line with theirs very easily. We've got 130 employees, and we're based all around the world. So I'm based in New Zealand. We've got people in North America, right across Europe, a lot in Scandinavia as well. So the next slide talks about the way we build our systems. So all our solutions are built inside Dynamics, and a lot of systems that you can look at that work with Business Central and Navision are sort of add-ons that tack on the side. But right from the very beginning, we've been built right within the product. We've now got 12,000 customers worldwide using our expense management, document capture, which is accounts payable automation, and document output, which enhances the ability of Business Central to send emails, to print, to send statements, and so on. So we have the 3 main products: expense management, document capture, and document output. Looking at this, it's the same familiar interface, and really that's a great advantage of the product, is that everything sits in role centers and in pages, or in the older versions of Navision on forms. So everything's familiar to staff when they're working with the system. And talking a little bit to this point here, the complexity and time spent implementing is reduced. Again, because we're right inside the product, we don't have to build interfaces or integration each time. You just run a wizard. When you install the product, you run a wizard, and it sets up some base setup for you, and then you can get up and running and tweak it from there. And lastly here, our implementation support is delivered by Microsoft Dynamics partners, so people like MicroChannel, and that's really means that you get a one-stop shop. So again, if you went and looked at some standalone expense system, you're having to deal with 2 parties, but all our resellers are very knowledgeable about the Continia solutions, and about Business Central, and about your business. So you get that one stop. So let's jump in. It's enough of the really high-level stuff. Let's go and have a look at what the interactions are for the various types of user. So here on the left-hand side, we've got the expense user. So we talked about them. They can either use on this phone here, they can use Android or iOS. And down here, there's also the Web Expense Portal, which is a browser which runs in a browser on a PC or Mac or whatever you want to run. And also, which I haven't got on here, which not many people use, but they can actually just sign into Business Central and enter their expenses in there. And when they've done that, they've worked out there, and that goes into Continia Online, which is sitting in the cloud, and that passes on their expenses, their mileages, their per diems into your Business Central or Navision database. The other thing that comes into the database is credit card transactions. So any corporate credit cards with Visa, Amex, MasterCard, they can flow into Business Central. And then what they do is they flow out through Continia Online onto the phone for the expense user to view those. So if they've stayed in a hotel and had a meal and rented a car, then those three will come through to them, and then they can attach the receipts, and the expenses can come back in. Whereas the other way of them working is if they're looking for reimbursement, then they're just straight entering expense from scratch. And we'll see both of those in the demo. So over here, we're showing basically we work on premise. So the older versions of Navision, which are on premise, we support back to quite old versions of NAV, Dynamics NAV, and of Navision still. And also, obviously, the Continia Online is sitting there for the cloud users. So the approvers, they can work here inside Business Central or inside NAV, or they can work on their phones in Android, iOS, or they can work in a browser. So I have a little bit more of a look at what the expense user sees when they're working. So they have four main types of transactions here. They can enter a new expense, which is a straight expense, and that's just the example we'll see is I think like a £5 for some morning tea or something like that. They can enter mileage, and that allows them. Just going to take a sip of water here. They can enter mileage, and their mileage, they get to say where they're going from, where they're going to. System automatically calculates the distance and then generates a reimbursement request. And they can enter per diems. So if they're allowed to claim a certain amount a day per whichever country they happen to be visiting, then they can claim their breakfast, lunch, dinners, and other things that we'll see along the way. And those three there, if you're just sort of doing individual things, but then down here, if you want to, you can pull them all into a report. So you can have a trip to the USA or a trip to the UK, and then you can use all those three things from above, any that you've created already or any that have been fed from the credit card. You can just pull them into one report and submit them as an entire report. So some people might do a monthly expense report, others might do a report for a particular trip. So we're probably not going to delve too much into that area. It's really just pulling together these other things, but we will look at these other things in here. What else do we want to cover on here? No, I think we'll go and have a look and see what the approver can do. So when an approver gets to look at the expense, again, we're looking at Business Central or on their phone or on the web, but they get an option. They can either reject the expense, they can approve it, they can approve and forward it to someone else to also approve. They can forward it without approval because it's come to them by mistake, or they just want someone else to approve it. Or they can forward it to someone else and ask that someone else to return it back to them for further approval. So yeah, we've got four things. I'll say those again. We've got approve, approve and forward, forward without approval, forward and return to me for approval. So this next slide is my last slide before the demo, and this really just talks about the value to the business and the value of the solution. So the first point here, really we get correct account posting and approval workflow. So the right people get to see these things to approve them. The posting goes to the GLs and to the dimensions that you want them to go to. And I mean, this is valuable in the system because it's really just all set up and configured with inside NAV and BC. So there's just one place to go and do this, and one place to inquire on it if you want to change it, and you get the same result every time. So we've got fully integrated in Business Central, so I've talked about that. I've probably banged that drum enough to say that we're built inside Dynamics. We're not a system that sits outside. We can customize without code, so you'll see that there's some expense types that come when you run the wizard, things like food or accommodation or petrol or things like that, or food with guests where you're forced to tell it about attendees. But you can add your own expense types, and that's just done within Business Central. You can make various fields mandatory, so typically if you're having food with guests, you want to make the number of attendees or the names of the attendees mandatory, because you need to capture that for tax purposes. Then, yeah, and also dimensions, so whatever dimensions you want to capture. So if for food you need to capture one dimension, or for a subscription you need to capture a different dimension, then you can put all those in there and filter them to what the user is allowed to see. And then right at the end here, I talk briefly about this integrated company credit card and statement reconciliation. So the corporate credit cards, we have some documentation which you can give to your banks, and the banks then go into the MasterCard or Amex or Visa systems, and they set them up to pass the information through to Continia, which then gets passed through into your Business Central database. And then, as we saw earlier, gets sort of pushed out, and we'll see again in the demo, gets pushed out to the user for the user to add receipts. At this point, I'm going to jump over to my, so I've got a phone emulator here. I'm just going to start it up. And so this is showing exactly what a user would see on their phone. And to start with, we're just going to do a simple expense. So they'd log on, or they could leave it logged on. They can opt to leave it logged on, but they'd log on like you just saw it do there. So if they want to come in and do a new expense, new mileage, new per diem, or new report, they've got this screen here, or these options here. Down the bottom here, we can see things which are already open. I've created some stuff for us to have a look at, because I didn't think you'd want to sit and watch me type for ages. So I've created some stuff there, and we can also go and have a look at history as well. And then on the right-hand side, there's templates. So if you regularly go and claim petrol, or if you and you put a particular dimension on that, or if you regularly do a same trip and you want to claim that mileage, then you can save the mileage claim, and you can bring them back up in the template here, and very quickly just change the date on them and send them in again. So let's go and have a look at creating a new expense. So I'm already got my picture here, and I'm on a trip in this case. So this is multinational, multi-currency, and so on. I mean, we've got one local currency thing here, but all these others are, this person has been traveling, or, having to claim expenses in foreign currencies. But this one was for morning tea, let's say in the UK, for £5.41. And it's defaulted here to a cash private card, because that's what's set up for me. This one hasn't come through on my corporate credit card, so I've paid for this either cash, or I'm just going to choose food there, either cash or on my own credit card, and then I'll put a description in there. My description is just below this. If this gets rejected or sent back to me, then I can get a comment through from the administrator as well. So we've got that functionality as well. Just because you've entered it doesn't mean that it's gone forever. It can come back to you. So we'll save that one. We'll actually go and submit that one. Let me just pull that one up again. And to submit, we just swipe across. We grab that and swipe that across. Right. So I haven't put the amount in there. So we'll go and have a look at that I'll leave this just on the create screen because we'll come back to there in a moment. But we're going to have a look at that in the in Business Central now. Let me see, where have we got that? It's hiding away behind here. So in the background, you just run this. There's a function here called synchronize, and we just set that to run in the background. But I'm just running that manually today in my demo system. But that would sit in the background, and that would go and pick that expense up from Continia Online. And it's telling me I've got one new expense come in. So I can go and have a look at that expense that I entered, and I can see all the details that I put in, and I can see the document there. And I'd set this up to automatically go for approval. So you can just set it, it comes in here, and a bookkeeper or a finance person has a look at it first. But I've just set that to go to pending approval. So we'll go off and approve that a little bit later. Now I've got something in red here, which is unhandled bank transactions. So when corporate credit cards come in for the first time, they come into this box here. And at the moment, it doesn't know who this corporate credit card is related to. So I'm just going to point it at Lena, because Lena is who we're signed on the phone out there. So let's go and assign the card to a user. So this is only ever just done once. So we'll assign it to Lena. Payment type must be assigned. Do you wish to proceed? Yes. And it's a MasterCard. So, and now because it knows it's a MasterCard, and MasterCard use certain codes in their tables to say food or accommodation or rental car or whatever, then the transactions which we're going to see back out in the on the phone already coded to us to a particular expense type. So we go back out here. I'll just break that up again. So now down in here, we can see the little, I've just clicked too many times. We can see the little MasterCard symbol here to show that we got some transactions that have come through. So if I went into one of these trips that I've got set up here, the USA trip or the UK trade show, I could then just add these into those and collect them into that bucket if I wanted to. But I'm really just going to push one of these through. I think we'll go to this Western Phoenix downtown. So if I tried to submit this now, it would tell me I haven't got a receipt for it. Western Phoenix receipt to go on here. We'll select that. And yep, we check that and we say, yes, that's the one. And so for these corporate credit card ones, then I'm just submitting that now. So, I've done all the work that I need to do. And so if I wanted to, I could go through those other three, but they're really just the same process. You click on it, you go and find your receipt, or you take a photo of your receipt at that point in time and attach those to the expense and then do the submit. Or then go and once you've attached the receipt to them, you could then go and put them in a report, and then at the end of the month, potentially, you could then submit the whole report. So we will come out of here and go back into Business Central, and I'm just going to do that synchronize again. And so now we've got 5 expenses sitting here in pending, and we can see 2 of them are pending approval. Let me just make that a little bit wider. And the other 3 are just pending the expense user. So they've come in from the corporate credit card, they've hit Business Central, they've gone out there, but we know they're sitting there waiting for them. As a bookkeeper, we know we're waiting for the expense user to do their part and attach the receipt. So we'll talk about per diems for a moment now. So in this scenario, this user's been off to Brisbane, and I've just done a little bit of data entry here, not very much. So I've said they went to Brisbane from the 13th to the 17th of August. And so they were away for 5 days. I haven't set up the amounts actually that they get reimbursed on here, but you know, that would normally come up and calculate the amount for us. And then for each of those 5 days, what I can do, I can go in here initially and I can say, well, every day there's a fixed amount for my accommodation, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and transport. And I want to put those fixed amounts into all of the days, and then I can apply that. And that will automatically set up those claims for each of those days at the standard rates that we're allowed to claim at. And then after that, I can go in, probably because on the Saturday you might not have had breakfast, and on the last day you might not have dinner or accommodation, but then you can go in and tweak it exactly the way you want and move these things around. So yeah, so here I had breakfast, lunch, dinner and drinks, and maybe my accommodation was prepaid for, but I'm just going to get a daily amount for whatever those are. And those are per country here. This is a very simple one, but you can do this by sort of by country and by region and so on, different amounts for different places. So I will go back from here. And then what I'd do, if I had all my dollar amounts set up, I'd just be submitting this. And just like the expenses, this would then roll on through to the approval process, and the approver will be able to see everything that have been done here and approve those. But I'm just going to cancel this one, and we'll have a bit of a look at mileages. So I've set up a mileage here, and I've said I've gone from 123 High Street down to Low Street. And then the system, it just uses, I think it uses Google in the background to find these places. So when you're typing them in, it's doing that auto search just like you get to Google. And then it shows me the way that I went. But if I called in to see another customer along the way, then I could add a via waypoint. I could say I went to Chester Hill on the way, and then it would recalculate that. So it's calculated that as 23 kilometers. And it's calculated, you know, based on a rate that's in the system. It's calculated that's $16.56 Australian. And I entered in, so yeah, what did I enter on here? I entered in where I was going from, where I was going to, and I entered in the date, and I entered in a description to say that I'm visiting Acme Limited. I've also got this little button here. Wherever we've got this button with the star, that's templates. So, you know, if I was claiming this type of trip every time, you know, once a week, then I could save it in there and just pull that up very quickly and change the date on it. So I will submit that one. We'll see that one for approval. And it's interesting when we do that, it says, oh, send and create a return. So, you know, if I've gone somewhere and I've gone back, I only have to enter that in once. I don't need to enter in 123 High Street to Low Street and then Low Street to 123 High Street. It'll just automatically create me a return trip. Also, if I then want to, you know, I was on a bit of a road trip and I want to then claim the mileage from Low Street to go and see some other customer, then I could send this and continue from Low Street. But in this case, I'm just going to send it up to the cloud and then on through to Business Central. So I think I discussed these a little bit before, but the reports that we can create, you see here, I can just from within the report, I can go and create an expense, I can go and create a mileage, I can go and create a per diem, or I can go and I can say, oh look, I just want to add one that already exists. So this one here and well, both of these relate to my USA Trade Show report. And then I could submit that one as well, and that would be another thing for people to approve. So let's just go back and have a look at the effect of that in Business Central. I'm synchronizing here. So I've got two new expenses and your mileage and so on. So when I look in my Continia expense management activities, I've now got 2 expense reports pending. If I go into those, I can see the details of those. That one's got 2 expenses on it, so I can drill down into that and see what's going on, and then I could drill down further into those expenses and into their receipts as well. Across here, I've got 3 just straight expenses pending. So I've got a morning tea and a LinkedIn one, which is still pending with the expense user. Before we had a couple of others in here, but now they're attached to the expense report, so they no longer sit here as undealt with. And across here, I've got a mileage. And this mileage shows me the map and shows me all the details that we saw out on the in the app. We don't need any tips, so we can say got it to those. So you just need to bear with me for a moment while I fire up my approval portal. Let's just do that. People would normally, this is just the way I have to get to it in the demo system, but people would normally have this as a they normally have this as a shortcut in their browser. So here we are. We've dropped in here. We've dropped into expense management. And we've got a couple of expenses sitting here. And so we can go and have a look at those. And we get to see, again, we just get to see all of that information that we saw before. So we get to see the receipt, the receipt there, and all the details across here. And then I think I talked earlier that we can forward things. So we can forward it off to somebody else if we wanted to. Could forward it off to EH and to approve and forward, or I could forward without approval or forward and return to me for approval. But I actually just want to cancel this because I actually want to approve this. I could also reject it. If I reject it, I have to give a reason for that. And then the bookkeeper would pick those rejected ones up and talk to the expense user about them. So I'll approve that one. And then the second one automatically comes up for my £5.40 in morning tea in the UK. Approve that one too. So I've got no more expenses here. And I want just going to have a look and see if there's any mileages there, because I think there is. There's a mileage one to work on. And again, I can see that route that they took. I can see the distance. And the amount being 1656. We'll approve that one as well. So if I jump back in here now and I refresh this screen, then what we should see is that we've got some things sitting here ready to post. So the bookkeeper or whoever's taking control of these expenses has now got one mileage ready to post and 2 expenses ready to post. So they can come in here on a regular basis, and then go to process here, and we can post batch. So we don't have to go and post each of them individually. We can just go post batch, and I can post all of that. I've got a few options there. And so then there's just posting, and the GL transactions are being created. And we'll just do the one for the mileage as well, ready to post. So we'll post that one as well. Don't need to batch post that because there's just the one of them. So now if we go and have a look at posted expenses, I have all that information that we've seen before, but in addition, I can go into the related and have a look at find entries, which to those of you who's on older versions of Navision or BC, it used to be called Navigate. They've renamed it to find entries. And that's where it goes off and just does the regular NAV BC thing of showing us any related entries. So we can see here that, you know, what GL account we hit. And I think we've hit, I'm not sure you set this demo up for some reason, we've hit the freight general product posting group. This was morning tea, so no way is it freight, but you know, it's hit everything that's been set up for it to go to, including the GST account. And if we want to go back and have a look at the original expense, we can get back to that, although we just came from the posted expense. But we can go look at the GST entries, we can look, there'll be an employee ledger entry and so on. So from those employee ledger entries, you can then suggest employee payments and reimburse them for the actual amounts that they spent, you know, that weren't credit card amounts. Or if you like to treat your employees as vendors, then you can set them up in that way instead of as employees. And then just when you do suggest vendor payments, you know, in your regular payment run, then the payments go out that way. And just for completeness, we'll go and have a look at the posted mileage. So again, we get to see everything here, and if I go into my related and my find entries down here, I can see where that went in the GL. So that went to 8270, whatever 8270, again with product posting group freight, but that's just a configuration. So the last thing to look at in here is we've also got a standard expense report that we can run. So if you, no, not the expense, sorry, not that one. We've got a status email that we can run here. So we can send the status email to the expense users, really just to remind them. We can set up various reminders over various number of days that, you know, they've had an expense with them that's come through on the corporate credit card and they haven't dealt with it. They haven't dealt with it yet. So I think that was what I wanted to show you in there. And there was just a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. One of them is that we also do have an on behalf function in here. So if you have someone who's not very good at doing their expenses, but they have a secretary who's quite particular, and the secretary can do those expenses for them, then that work can be delegated to the secretary, and they can just enter into the expenses. So they're basically working on behalf of the actual person who's incurred the expense. And also in the future, probably, well, this year, we'll have some OCR technology involved in those receipts. So once you scan those receipts, we'll actually try and pre-populate some amounts and perhaps the expense type and the dates and you know, as much of the data entry that we can do. But receipts are very variable. You know, it's quite hard. We'll be using some AI software to recognize those receipts and you know, derive whatever data they can from there. And one other area we didn't look at was allocations. So if I incur an expense and I need to charge it to 2 different departments, let's say, then as a user I can do that. When I'm entering the expense, I can click on a button to go and allocate that expense out to other people or to other departments, but also back in Business Central, the Business Central bookkeeper can also do that. So we'll just have a quick look at that allocation of an expense. So if we go, I'll just full screen this so that you can see it clearly. We'll go into Open here. And we'll go into this LinkedIn one. So down the bottom here, I can do add allocation lines. And if I'd configured it in a particular way, then what I'd be able to do is add a line here, which put it to probably the same expense type, but I could have different dimensions on here. So, you know, maybe this is a subscription to LinkedIn, and maybe 2 departments have to pay for that. Maybe marketing and my whatever department I work in have to pay for my subscription for LinkedIn. And if I know that, I can do that in here, but otherwise the bookkeeper can do it once it gets up into Business Central.